Hello everyone, what is up? It is me, AlbyMTG, and today I'll be bringing you guys a tournament report. Last week I played in a 2K tournament, so there was $2,000 in prizes, and it was a modern tournament. And I played the same deck this week. It is a 1K tournament, so there's $1,000 in prizes. I just played the same exact deck list. I didn't want to overthink it too much, so I did well at the last time that I played this at a bigger tournament. Of course, you can watch that tournament report here on the channel. That was one of last week's videos. I believe it was last Saturday's video, possibly last Sunday's video, but I think it was last Saturday's. And if you want to see how I did in there, and you want to hear about more matches that I had with this beautiful deck here, 8-rack, then you can go ahead and watch that video. But for the time being, we'll go ahead and I won't spend too much time here on the deck since I talked about it a lot last time. But basically the way that the deck works is we are a mono-black discard-based deck. We're using things like Raven's Crime, target player discards a card, Inquisition of Kozilek, as well as Thoughtseize, and eventually we're just going to take all the cards out of our opponent's hand, and then our win conditions are the rack, which says at the end of target opponent's upkeep, the rack deals that player 1 damage for each card in his or her hand, fewer than 3. And Shrieking Affliction, which says at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, if that player has 1 or fewer cards in hand, he or she loses 3 life. So we're basically just trying to protect ourselves. We have some removal spells here, Fatal Push and Dismember, for things that can sometimes slip through our discard spells. And then aside from that, we're just trying to slowly grind out our opponent and win via the rack and Shrieking Affliction. So in round 1, my opponent was on Jeskai Control. Jeskai Control is generally a pretty good matchup for me. The slower decks that are just trying to win in the late game generally can't do too well against 8-rack, and so normally I would have a fantastic matchup against a Jeskai blue-white control type of deck, and unfortunately this time I started off my tournament losing 0-2 to my best matchup, which of course I felt like was basically just an awful way to start the tournament. It's one thing to lose to a bad matchup, it's one thing to start off and it's a completely other thing to lose to your best matchup 0-2 to start off your tournament. So basically after this match I knew it was gonna be a long day. Essentially what the Jeskai control list is trying to do is it's trying to just be very controlly over what you do. Things like Logic Knot to counter your spells, things like Mana Leak here to counter your spells, and then things like Cryptic Command, which is a very, very strong counterspell. There's some card selection from Search for Azcanta, which the flipped version of Search for Azcanta is absolutely fantastic in this deck. You can see it's also running some copies of the new Planeswalker Teferi Hero of Dominaria. Also notable, I forgot to mention this again at the start, the deck lists I'm showing you here are just examples of the deck list. I don't have my exact opponent's deck lists for this tournament, so these are just going to be examples of them. All of these are coming straight off of MTG Goldfish. If you just click Modern and then go to a Jeskai control list, you will see the same exact list that I'm currently showing here. And so yeah, it basically just tries to control the board, and I don't play many creatures, so a lot of these kill spells are just like dead cards, like Supreme Verdict doesn't really do anything against me. But one advantage that the Jeskai control list has is that if I try to make them discard spells, they can just respond with things like Lightning Bolt targeting me, Lightning Helix targeting me, and then they have things like Snapcaster Mage to again repeat the process, dealing 3 to me with a Lightning Bolt and dealing 3 to me again with a Lightning Helix. So eventually ended up losing this one, felt pretty bad. There are some really good sideboard cards here that are quite strong against me, things like Celestial Purge, which was a card that I saw played against me quite a bit today. So Celestial Purge is a strong one. Abrade is also like fine, destroys target artifact, which kills the rack, as well as things like Ensnaring Bridge, but I wouldn't really bring in Ensnaring Bridge in this matchup. I actually take out my main board Ensnaring Bridge in this matchup, but there's some other just strong ones here, like Negate 2 is just absolutely incredible against my deck, so ended up losing this one off to a pretty poor start. So after that, I go up against Green-White Hexproof, also known as Boggles. The way that this deck works is things like Gladecover Scout, which is a 1-mana 1/1 with Hexproof, and Slippery Boggle, which is essentially a 1-mana 1/1 with Hexproof as well. And then they just try and use their Hexproof creature. They add a bunch of enchantments to it, things like Rancor, things like Spider Umbra, Ethereal Armor, and an extremely strong card in the form of Daybreak Coronet, which is just super strong, gives another creature gives the enchanted creature +3/+3 first strike, vigilance, and lifelink. And because you're running 26 enchantments, the chances that your creature will have an aura attached to it are quite strong for the Daybreak Coronet. So this deck is very, very strong, and it's quite hard to deal with if you don't have the removal spells to deal with it, because even if you do have the removal spells to deal with it, they can't be the targets of them. So you really need a specific set of removal spells to be able to deal with the hexproof creatures. And luckily for me, something like Liliana of the Veil, target player sacrifices a creature. That's quite strong against them, as well as as well as Smallpox. Each player loses 1 life, discards a card, sacrifices a creature, then sacrifices a land. So that's a very, very nice way for me to deal with them. They have I have 8 ways of dealing with their hexproof creatures. Notably, though, this deck plays 4 main board copies of a card that I essentially can't beat, and that is Leyline of Sanctity. If Leyline of Sanctity is in your opening hand, you begin the game with it on the battlefield, and that it just simply says, you have Hexproof. You have Hexproof means that all of these discard spells that I have in here can't do anything. And what makes it super strong is the Liliana of the Veil. For each player discards a card, we're fine with that, but the sacrifices a creature that I was telling you about before that could deal with a boggle, this is a target player sacrifices a creature, so if they have Hexproof, I can't even target them as the player to sacrifice their own creature, so that lowers my chances down to only 4 copies of a card that could deal with their Hexproof creature. Oh, what did I just do? Oh my god, I am sorry. My apologies, everyone. There we go. That should be back to normal. Again, my apologies, everyone. I don't know what I just did there. But so yeah, Leyline of Sanctity, absolutely ridiculous card against me. And my opponent started game 1 with it in play and still had the turn 1 slippery boggle. So that was quite strong for them. But you know how I said that it was virtually impossible for me to win? I somehow managed to win that matchup. We had to draw, I think it was like 3 Smallpoxes to win that matchup, but we ended up getting there. Game 2, I ended up losing. I forget what happened specifically in that match, but I think it was something along the lines of Seal of Primordium, just being a fantastic card against me. Sacrifice Seal of Primordium, destroy target artifact or enchantment. What's really strong about Seal of Primordium is that you can get it onto the battlefield against me, and I can't make you discard it out of your hand. You can have it on the battlefield. It's protected from basically everything in black because there's basically no enchantment removal in black. So whenever you want to, you can choose to blow my Ensnaring Bridge, my Rack, my Shrieking Affliction, just whenever you want to, and I can't do anything about it because it's already on the battlefield, so I can't take it out of your hand. So I think that's basically what happened in Game 2, was that Seal of Primordium was just great. And then in Game 3, I just ended up winning. My opponent had the turn 1 Slippery Bogle again, and they didn't have the Leyline of Sanctity, so I was able to cast some Smallpox, make them sacrifice their boggle, and we ended up getting there. So I'm now sitting at 1-1 in the tournament, and my next matchup was against the Ramunap Red / Bomat Red. This deck is just not great. There's a few people that really like it. It does put up, like you can see here, it 5-0'd a competitive league, but it just, every time I've played against this deck, I've been extremely underwhelmed. Every time I've seen this deck played, I've been extremely underwhelmed. The deck plays standard cards like Bomat Courier and even something like Earthshaker Kenra, so it's basically just trying to knock you down super fast, just try and lower your life total as fast as possible, and then worst comes to worst in the late game, they do have access to Ramunap Ruins, and then aside from that, they're just running things like Lightning Bolt and just some other really good red cards, things like Eidolon of the Great Rebel, which is a fantastic card as well. I ended up winning this matchup 2-0. In Game 1, my opponent, like I said, is not playing this exact list. My opponent had Goblin Electromancer, had Goblin Rabblemaster in their list, so they were making a Goblin token every turn, and they ended up getting 2 of them out, so they were making 2 Goblin tokens every turn. But luckily, I had an Ensnaring Bridge with 0 cards in hand, and I was able to just grind that out because they had no way of dealing with an Ensnaring Bridge in the pre-boarded games. So that was very nice, and I ended up winning that one, despite my opponent having like 17 or 18 Goblin tokens on the field at the end of Game 1. And then game two, nice and simple. We used opponent kept kind of a shaky hand. It had one land in it, and then we ended up just using smallpox to make them sacrifice their one land. And from there, it was basically just not even a game of Magic. And I just made him discard the rest of his cards. Won the game, nice and simple. Um, Again, I don't really recommend this deck. I've been super underwhelmed with it. I feel like if you want to be playing something like this, you should just play Burn instead. Burn is a bit more expensive, but it's a lot better. It's just I don't really know what to say in terms of this deck. I don't know why people are drawn to it so much. But at the same time, I'm the same way with 8-Rack. A lot of people question my deck choice when it comes to 8-Rack, but I really enjoy it, so maybe it's just kind of a personal preference thing, but this deck just hasn't really put up any good results outside of this 150 list, and I've seen a bunch of people put it together then after this 150 list and just haven't been able to put up the same results that this one player managed to do, so I don't really recommend this deck. I don't think it's the best. But anyway, I won this one 2-0, so that puts me to 2-1 on the tournament. So here we'll go into round 3 where I played against Red-Green Eldrazi. And this one I ended up winning 2-0 as well. Game 1, again, Ensnaring Bridge came in clutch, and there is no mainboard way of dealing with an Ensnaring Bridge for the Red-Green Eldrazi deck. And then in Game 2, my opponent cast Ancient Stirrings, and every time that she said that she cast 2 Ancient Stirrings in that game, and she said in her Ancient Stirring she found 2 copies of Ancient Grudge, both of her Ancient Stirrings. And of course, if you Ancient Stirrings being one colorless, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a colorless card from among them and put it into your hand, then put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So she cast this, and the card that, of course, is best against me in the matchup is Ancient Grudge, because they can use this to destroy an artifact and then flash it back to destroy another artifact. And like I said, the artifacts in my deck include things like Ensnaring Bridge, which is super strong in this matchup, as well as my racks. So she said that she managed to find an Ancient Grudge in each of the 2 Ancient Stirrings that she cast, and of course you can't get Ancient Grudge off of Ancient Stirrings, so we ended up winning that one after sitting behind an Ensnaring Bridge again, and then just kind of beating our opponent down by taking the cards out of her hand. So that's 2-0. I'm now at 3-1 in the tournament, and I'm feeling all right. I've kind of rebounded from the fact that I lost to one of my best matchups. But so at this point in the tournament, people start kind of looking at the pairings and looking at the standings and start determining who might end up in the top 8. There's 41 players, I believe, at this tournament. So generally, what people were thinking was like 4-2 might get in, 4-1-1 would definitely get in. Was what people were saying, and so at this point, it seemed like the next round for me was going to be a win and end. If I won this next one, I'd be able to intentionally draw with my opponent in the last round, and then both my opponent in the last round and I would end up making the top 8 of this tournament. So that's kind of the mindset that I had going into it. And again, I played against this one I think, like I said, is just the better version of the Ramunap Red deck. And this was Burn. I actually went against somebody that I knew. He's a very good player, Justin Bova, fantastic player, and I managed to take him down 2-0. He usually gets the best of me, but I managed to get the best of him in this case here. And of course, Burn is just trying to kill you as fast as possible using things like Goblin Guide, Monastery Swift Spear, Eidolon of the Great Revel, and then a bunch of burn spells like Lava Spike to deal 3 to me, Lightning Bolt to deal 3 to me, Boros Charm deals 4 to me, Lightning Helix deal 3 to me. You guys get the point. They're just trying to kill me as fast as possible, and luckily, since they're trying to kill me as fast as possible, they're using the cards up in their hand, and if they're using the cards up in their hand, then they're taking damage from my Shrieking Affliction and my rack effects. So it just ends up being a whole race situation, and seeing who can kill their opponent the fastest. And in this case, both times it happened to be me. So that was great. And so now I am 4-1. I'm pretty sure all I have to do now is intentionally draw with my opponent in the last round, and then both of us make the top 8. Things are great. And then we take a look at the standings, and there are 3 players at 12 points, meaning there are 3 players at 13 points, I believe, because... Hold on. No, it was 2 players at 13 points, and like 9 players at... 6 is... Okay, so there was 2 players at 13 points, 1 player at... God, math is so hard. I hate myself. Okay, there was 2 players at 13 points, 7 players at 9 or at 12 points, okay? So 12 points being 4 wins, 1 loss, 13 points being 4 wins, 1 draw, no losses. You get 3 points for a win, 1 point for a tie, 0 points for a loss, and that's just kind of how standings work. And then from there, it goes by your tiebreakers. The biggest tiebreaker being your opponent's match win percentage. That just kind of is a way of saying if you win against the harder opponents, the decks or the opponents who were doing better in the tournament, then it feels like you were having a more challenged match, and so that'll give you better tiebreakers. And unfortunately, my tiebreakers were the worst. And if you can remember correctly, after I learned how to do math, it was 2 players who had more than 12 points, 7 players who were at 12 points. So that means that if everybody intentionally draws, that leaves 1 player who doesn't get in if they intentionally draw, and that 1 player would have been me. So I needed to play my last round. After thinking I could just intentionally draw, I was like, man, this is great. I'm going to top 8 this tournament. Going to make a nice YouTube video. It's going to be great. And instead, I end up having to play my last round, and I go up against another favorable matchup. I go against blue-white control. Again, similar to the Jeskai control list, this is trying to just control the board, a bunch of counter spells, a bunch of ways to remove creatures and things like that. But notably, what happened in this matchup is that it also plays a lot of planeswalkers, and if I can't get the planeswalkers out of your hand, then the planeswalkers will end up just taking over the game. You can see here 2 copies of Gideon of the Trials, 3 copies of Jace the Mind Sculptor, 1 copy of Gideon Jura here in this list, and I think my opponent was playing a similar split of planeswalkers, maybe even up to 4 Jace the Mind Sculptor. And so this is supposed to be a really good matchup for me, and I end up losing 1-2, and it was really painful. It was really painful. I had such a great tournament. I thought I was going to end up here in the top 8 after beating Bova on Burn here. I thought I was fine. I thought I was going to slip into this top 8 nice and simple, just draw with my opponent. Unfortunately, the way that the breakers came down, I couldn't do that, and I had to play against what was supposed to be my best matchup, and I ended up losing in 3 games, which was super unfortunate. Apparently, my opponent was top decking quite well, was what my friend who was watching the game, he was standing behind my opponent as he was watching, and he said that like every time that he would top deck something, it was just fantastic against me. And so sometimes that just happens. Sometimes your opponents are drawing cards good or better than you are, and that's sometimes just what happens in Magic. So unfortunately, I ended up 4-2 on this tournament. I finished 14th out of 40 something after this last round, and my opponent in this round actually ended up making it into the top 8, so congratulations to him. He played very well against me. Even if his top decks were apparently quite strong, he still played quite well against me. And yeah, nothing really else I can say here about this matchup. It was just super unfortunate that the 2 matches. If you were gonna give me these 6 matchups and ask me what 2 matchups I was gonna lose today, I would have told you I probably lose Burn and I probably lose Red-Green Eldrazi. Red-Green Eldrazi is basically, do I have the Ensnaring Bridge? And since I'm only playing 1 in the side and 1 in the main, I would have assumed the answer was no, that I wouldn't have found it, and then I would have said probably Burn. It's very likely for me to lose the race against Burn. I would have fully expected myself to take down Jeskai control and me to take down blue-white control. I felt like those would have been the matchups that would have just been, fantastic. Snap them off, sign the slip, 2-0 in favor of me. But unfortunately, that's just not how it went this tournament for me. I made some changes to my deck in preparation for last week's tournament. I added in a lot more stuff to focus on the creature matchups, adding additional copies of things like Fatal Push and Bantu's Last Reckoning to the sideboard, all cards that care very heavily about creatures, and I cut down on things like the number of Duress that I was playing and cards like that. And so that ended up hurting me today. I ended up losing to a matchup that I thought I was favored in, and unfortunately it just didn't work that way. So again, really quickly, I will run through them. Jeskai Control, I lost 0-2. Green-White Hexproof, I won 2-1. Against Ramunap Red, I won 2-0. Against Red-Green Eldrazi, I won 2-0. Against Burn, I won 2-0. And then against Blue-White Control, I lost 1-2. So my tournament was over, finished in 14th. I did have a friend make it into the top 8, so that was super cool. He was playing the black-green rock deck, which is just a nice grindy mid-range kind of deck that plays really powerful cards like Tarmogoyf, Scavenging Ooze, and then like removal spells like Maelstrom Pulse and Abrupt Decay, those kind of cards. So congratulations, Andrew, if you're watching this. Nice work on the top 8. Congratulations, friend. And again, this has been my tournament recap here, playing the same list as last time. So a top 12 finished last week, followed by a top 16 finish this week. Not too bad, not too bad. I can't complain too much. But nonetheless, any day where I get to play some good matches of competitive Magic is a good day in my book, and so that's exactly what this was, and I got to make a video out of it and share my experience with you guys, so hopefully you guys did enjoy it. Of course, if you guys like these tournament recap styles and you like hearing me talk about them, of course, let me know down low in the comments, and I will continue to continue making them, was it the sentence I was about to just say? It's been a long day, guys. It's been a really, really long day. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching the video. Like I said, let me know down low in the comment section if you guys want to see more tournament reports in the future, and I will see you guys here tomorrow for yet another Magic the Gathering video.